There we go. All right, we are now recording. This is Group 4, and we are reviewing for the Army crew case study. So before we start, did anyone have any kind of general thoughts about the case that they wanted to share anyway?
I mean,
wow, it was actually, I just thought it was really interesting. Like, I didn't realize how intense rowing was.
Yeah.
Thought it was just strong back muscles and whatnot, right?
So does it go into how they finally resolved everything in the leader information?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. I didn't read all the way through it. I read some of it.
Yep. So it shares that, and so that's kind of, I guess, the treat at the very end. Once we kind of go through our thoughts and our process, then we see what they actually did. So
I think if they didn't share it, I was going to have to go and Google it.
I think
I know what it is, so I mean, that's why I was asking.
All right. Well, so to start us off, of course, the kind of summary of the case was that there's 8 crew rowing teams where they have to be synchronized. Everyone has to work well together, and it's one of the fastest man-powered boating activities ever created. And so, of course, they use it in the Olympics. The Army is using it, or there's a team from the Army, and of course, the coach has different methods of finding out who's going to be on the varsity boat and the junior varsity boat. So, from y'all's reading, what does the varsity? Why do you guys think the varsity team keeps losing to the JV team?
You know, part of my first instinct, even like when they first talked about that they were after they won their first race and they went back and then they lost again. Part of that first instinct that I had was they kind of won that prestigious title, and even though they're still working really hard, sometimes I think you have titles that can kind of go to your head individually, even though it's a team sport. Individually, you feel like you're better.
Yeah.
And so I kind of thought that went to their heads, that power, you know, even individually. And I kind of had that first initial thought when I first heard they lost, you know.
Hey guys, I just got an email from Caleb.
Hey, Jordan, welcome.
Hey.
Oh, perfect.
Yep, there's Caleb.
And we got Caleb too. We've got everybody.
Full group. Great.
How's it going, guys?
Good.
Good. All right. So we are reviewing, just real quick to recap, we're reviewing the case study, the Army case study, Army crew. And we're reviewing about the difference between the varsity team and the JV team and why we think the varsity team kept losing to the JV team. And so we heard a good response from Darcy where she was kind of mentioning that it was the title itself might have contributed to that. It kind of puffed up a little bit of pride in the varsity team, and it's a team sport, but now they're focused more on like, hey, that's my title, and they start to kind of think individually at that point. Is that right, Darcy?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
I think there's a lot of competition.
Go ahead.
I just remember just think of like high school. Like there's just a lot of competition in between two teams from the same place. Like I think that could psychologically do a lot to a team.
Yeah.
You know? I think that could be as well.
Yeah, I've heard there's a lot of good things about competition within a team, but then also at the same time it can go too far.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, there's 2 things that I kind of thought of. One, after they made got that first loss, they, you know, sometimes that losing starts setting in on you, and they're like, oh wait, we're not as good as we thought we were, maybe, and so it just kind of kept getting worse and worse. And the other thing that I kind of got was when they were doing the studies, that the leadership was not there on the varsity boat. You know, and I kind of think of the coxswain, who's supposed to be the coach on the boat and relay back any issues to the coach. And it just seems like if he doesn't have leadership, I think it starts with him, because if he didn't relay the problems and hit this stuff when it first started happening, it kept getting worse and worse over the season. So I think there's a lot to do with the leadership of the boat itself. But
That's what
once
I
you
got.
get that mindset, you start, to doubting yourself more and more.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it could have maybe been intervened a little sooner to prevent it from getting that far then.
Yeah.
Always.
Any other thoughts about why you guys think the varsity team kept losing to the JV team?
I think the varsity team were too obsessed with themselves.
Yeah.
They were so focused on doing their best. They weren't focused on making sure the team was doing well.
Yeah. Okay, so they were individually focused, kind of self-absorbed at that point instead of working on the team. And I think you bring up a good point, because a lot of them did mention, like, hey, I'm doing all the work here. Where's the rest of you? You guys aren't doing anything. You're slacking. So they kind of got that self-absorbed mindset.
Yeah, like the case talks
Even in
about
their individual.
exactly and think, and they were probably too focused on making sure they were the main person, so
Yeah.
just being on the same beat.
Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Okay. I was going to say, I got pretty much the same kind of feedback, how varsity was all into themselves, that they thought they were better than them and that they could just kind of relax a little bit. But then what kind of came to my thought was more like running like an engine. If the whole team's not running all the cylinders and moving all the components all together, then they're always going to fail and they're always not going to be as strong to succeed. And I think with that first loss is they instantly had that negative, bitter attitude, which really tore them down. I mean, rather than saying, all right, we actually made a mistake, we need to improve ourselves, it was, I can't believe we just lost.
Yeah.
So
Instead of focusing on what they could improve or anything, they were kind of like, why are we losing? And focusing on getting just frustrated
they were
about
looking
that.
for somebody to blame rather than the leader taking responsibility, saying, hey, I know there's things that we need to improve on and worked on, and we just didn't.
Yep.
You notice that in the JV emails as well, like the JV talked about everything as a team. Nothing was pointed out, nothing was like a blame game. Even in public or even in private to the coach, everything was team oriented. And sometimes I think like the varsity team, much like anybody, when you feel like you're doing your best, you don't want to think that you messed up somehow, that you want to assume it was somebody else's fault. You don't want to take that opportunity to learn, which I feel like is a big weakness the varsity team had. They weren't taking that key moment to really learn from each other and learn how to.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that was really evident when they had the meeting by the picnic tables, when like 3-4 guys kept getting them saying, I'm doing everything I can. You guys are the ones that are failing. So, that kind of solidifies what Darcy was just saying.
Yeah. Yeah. So they were focused more on how they could blame someone else, because clearly it couldn't be their fault. And so, yeah, a lot of what I'm hearing is kind of the issues is the mindset of the varsity team was wrong. It was off. They were being negative. They were being self-absorbed. And that a lot of the conflict could have been prevented earlier from leadership there. And so it's very interesting that when you think about sports, when I think about sports, like any kind of Olympic game, it's just be powerful, be strong, be the fastest, the best, and so on. And it's like this particular sport that doesn't work. You've got to completely turn that mindset off, be competitive, but be another, I think you had mentioned, Jordan, you said it'd be another wheel on the train or something like that, just all move at the same time. And so,
yeah, just like an engine, how all the cylinders need to alternate together and burn clearly and concisely in order to be fully functional operating, and one fails and the whole system fails.
being strong, but being strong together. And so, given the conflict that you guys saw, kind of the switching between the boats, if you remember from the case study, switch people one at a time from each boat to see who was kind of the weak link, and then they would have constant competitions and so on, and they would keep just pushing against each other instead of kind of moving on. Do you feel that conflict was valid? Do you feel that there's an acceptable amount of conflict, or what's the limit?
I think there's
Well,
always good.
Oh, go ahead. Go ahead, Everett.
Yeah, thanks. I think it's always good to have competition within a team or within like multiple teams, because it helps you progress and get better. But they probably went past their bounds of trying to beat each other versus like working together.
Yeah.
I kind of feel like that double team, like switching the teams, was brought on a little too late, so it made the conflict more intense. Whereas I think if they would have kind of started that process to kind of figure out where the balance was, or the right team mix was earlier on, I don't think they would have saw it much as a conflict. But I noticed that it actually became, when those varsity players dropped down to the JV boat and the JV boat kept winning by more, the interesting thing I thought about that was, yeah, they're getting a little more strength because the varsity was supposedly stronger, but it was almost those varsity players, in my opinion, kind of craved that team and that success of a team. And so they would just get in there and want to be a team member on the JV. But yet when they'd go back to varsity, they didn't take that lesson of teamwork back with them. I just thought that was really interesting, and that they functioned as a team because they won by more even when they traded players. So
So they left that on the boat, essentially. They
that
left that JV boat.
boat just kept it all.
So kind of my thought process, and from what you guys have shared and what I've learned, when I think about the conflict between the boats, I think it's absolutely necessary for them to kind of figure out who's the strongest, what teams are going to work together. And I found that he figured that out. The coach figured that out when he chose who's on the varsity boat, who's on the JV boat. The fact that he couldn't figure out why they couldn't win afterwards, to me, didn't merit him consistently testing that problem. Instead, he should have viewed other issues that he could have, caught earlier, like the conflict between the varsity team and so on. And so the competition, I think, is absolutely necessary, but to a point, and I think he pushed that a little too far, and then it became almost degrading to the varsity team.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Yep.
So, all right. And let's see.
So I found a couple questions that are on the instructions. Do you want me to read them out to you?
Sure.
The second one's, we kind of answered the first one. The second one says, what should Coach P have done earlier in the season to resolve this problem? At exactly what point should he have intervened differently? Is the question.
I'll start with that. I mean, when he should have intervened, it makes me wonder how he's been a coach for 8 years and maybe he's just not had the conflict. But, he should have intervened after varsity was losing, the first 4 or 5 matches, when it started becoming apparent that it was a consistent thing, because at that point there had to be an issue, and he should have, what he should have done, I'm not a professional in that respect, but I think he needed to have kind of what he did at the picnic table, just have a big group meeting, try to air out what's going on. I think they could have hashed out some of the differences a little bit earlier if he would have confronted it a little bit earlier.
Right. So had that picnic meeting a little bit sooner, kind of get everyone's intake on it.
Yeah, like maybe after the first meet or after the first couple meets, when the JV team was showing better consistency than they were.
Okay. Any other creative ways you guys think he could have, how he could have prevented that?
I kind of feel like if Brian had, the right, had like in line with Brian's thinking, I guess is how I should put it. Like I think he was relying too much on his, like he was doubting his physical data that he had gained. Like, but that was like tried and tested, you know, it was proven correct. So when you have like hard evidence like that, like you have that tested, prove, you know that there's another underlying factor, and I think that's when he should have been thinking outside the box.
Right.
So early on, like you were saying, like Brian was saying, like after the second or third match when they just lost, like, or even in practices where it was a consistent thing, like again, that's another hard, like rely on your hard data and go to there's a, like, you know, when you're in business, there's procedures and you have to start like peeling away at the layers, and the hard numbers are hard numbers, and it's getting to that personal level that he wasn't getting to soon enough. I feel like he needed to be there sooner.
Yeah. So he crunched the numbers, he proved the numbers, but instead of moving from the numbers, he kind of kept going back to them, is what you're saying.
Mm-hmm.
Anyone else?
I agree with that. He just got stuck on what he'd already figured out. He wasn't trying to think of new things. He was just getting stuck in a rut.
I was gonna say my thought was he was dwelling on the past rather than making active goals to achieve the future.
Yeah. So he
Yeah, good point.
he should have done a couple of things regarding focusing on the future and getting past the numbers, but instead he didn't. And so since that's already done, that's kind of in the past. What do you guys think he should do now that that's already done and that boat's already sailed? Everyone's mad at each other. What should he do now?
I think the big thing is he's got to resolve the conflict. He's got to, you know, even though it's only 4 days ahead of the deal, you know, he's got to get that group back to where they need to be. And, you know, I know how he does resolve it, so I won't, you know, spoil it for anybody that doesn't. But, you know, he's got to come up with some kind of speech, some kind of activity to make those people start trusting each other and working together as a team.
Okay.
I kind of feel like he should take the JV out of it altogether. Like, it's 4 days away. If he's got his team, it's his team. Like, he's stuck with it to this point. It's got to be his team, and he has to show that team that he trusts them. And so, in my opinion, to show that trust, he's got to pull JV from practice, basically, or practice in a different location, and just be like, this is our team. This is the trust we have, and go back to like the closing of the eyes. You know, those trust activities you have with another. Like, find a way to do the MLM rah cheers. I don't know how else to put it. That's how I think of it. Like all the people who like, you're awesome. Like, find that way to where they have to like write sticky notes about somebody, and then they go and just stick them on them, and those people have to take them off and read them, number one, to like just see what is good about them, and then find that blind trust again. But start with the trust of the coach that this is my team that I'm taking, and so I trust that it's possible. The JV's not here. That's not our focus anymore. It's us. It's us as a team, as a unit. So that's kind of how I feel it should go.
Mm-hmm.
The only issue with that is that the JV team's important too, because they actually get to race in all the same races. So you don't want to alienate them in the progress they've made, because they're the future of the team. You know, once some of the seniors are leaving and everything. So you got to be really careful with that. But, you know, another thought is maybe just throw them in a room, and because, you know, at the picnic meeting, they were spread out and kind of disengaged and everything. Just put them in a very small room where they have to engage with each other and work with each other, and you know, maybe something like that could help as well.
They should pull out the hug shirt, you know, that parents use, like, you guys aren't getting along, so
The
here's
hug shirt. They're
You
one
have to
big
get
enough, they're all
along.
like bulging muscles. They see if they
That's
all.
fun, really big. They can do it.
So I want to kind of challenge those kind of that thought process both of you had regarding what should be done. If it were you, let's say that you were the coach and you had to now pull the varsity team or the varsity and the junior team, however you kind of want to do it, what exactly would you say? What exactly would you have them do? And kind of justify it by saying, well, I would do this, and this is the impact it would have to the team. Hopefully it would do this, but I also recognize the risk. So what impact would your decision have, and what kind of risk do you also foresee?
I guess, was somebody going?
Yeah. Well, I mean,
Go ahead.
well, if I were the coach in that situation, my thought process was I would definitely get them together, and I would focus more on the positive things of what was successful and what information can they share and help the varsity become better. Because in all reality, varsity, some of them are moving on, they're leaving. Well, guess what? Who's going to get the next slot? That's the JV. They're going to get their chance, and they're only have room to develop even better. So, I mean, if the if the JV team can, pretty much tone down their pride and be like, hey, we want to help you succeed because all together we're pretty much on the same team.
Okay.
Yeah, something I was kind of thinking about just now is, everything that the coach did was he put JV versus varsity, mixed the JV with the varsity, did all kinds of time trials and tests and everything like that. Kind of with what Darcy was saying is, okay, so kind of pull the JV out of all those time tests and all those things and have competition between varsity players, some kind of competition, whether it's running a race, rowing, going out and rowing two-man against each other. I think that's where you could build more of a team aspect, because you're dealing with just the varsity in those races instead of trying to intermingle it with the varsity or the JV to see how it may work with the JV. He's already got, like we've said, he's already got all the time studies and all the results showing that the varsity's superior in technique and conditioning. So he's just got to get them to work together and figure out how to get them together. So doing some kind of team exercise with them like that would potentially help.
Right. So that kind of team exercise, what would you say, kind of what you were saying is that it gets them out of that competition with the junior varsity and kind of pinned against each other to work through some things. But what would you say is like a risk of that method? Or a potential risk anyway?
Well, I guess it could breed more and more competition and contention where they may not end up gelling. They may get more and more distant. Could be a potential for that. But I think, with everything he's tried, I think that's one of the few things he hasn't tried and something I think that would work.
Okay.
I have a similar mindset for that one. It's just he has the idea of potentially mixing the JV and the varsity teams, but the JV teams are doing really, really well. And so that is more likely to make them do worse than better. He's better off just taking them out of the picture and just focusing on getting the varsity team just on track with each other. Just getting rid of that me mentality. Just getting them in sync, because they aren't in sync. That's the problem. But how to do that, it's the same thing we've all been saying, I think. Just team building stuff. Pep talks, I don't know. Especially to accomplish that, really.
Yeah. So talking to them, giving them pep talks, letting them do team building things. And I kind of had the same thought. In fact, when I was reviewing it before I got too far into it, my thought process was like, why doesn't this coach just pull them aside, say, all right, spill it, like spill the beans, everyone just say what's on your mind, get this off your chest, and let's get it over with and done. But the case study, of course, continued to read, and everyone did, and it didn't resolve anything. So my thought process clearly wasn't right. I figured that them being able to just get it off their chest and understand each other, they would be able to kind of see that everyone's struggling and hopefully kind of fill in the gaps. But that my risk was that they could end up hating each other more or not communicating well enough more, and that's exactly what happened. And so that was kind of the thought process I had.
I think that unfortunately that picnic, we just kind of keep going back to it, that picnic table meeting just happened to come a little late, not necessarily not past the point of no return, but at that point he had let their mindset, he saw the emails from earlier on in the training where they were finger pointing and blaming. When you finger point and blame and you're not really corrected to be more team focused, you justify you're in the right. Like you're building yourself up that you're not wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think what he needs to come down to, unfortunately, which if I was the coach, I would, again, I'd come back to trust me, where I would be like, I messed up. You guys have everything it takes. Here's the hard numbers. Like I'd post the numbers on the board. I'd post the past statistics on the board from the numbers showing their improvements and their strengths and how they got to that place as each individual member of a team. And then I would point out that I made the mistake of not letting them focus on a team and coming in between and point out that we all have something to lose when we don't work as a team. The JV realized it because they didn't make varsity. And once we realized that we're a team and we have to focus and to where they studied in Atlanta, biographies and past histories of racing and test, like, what is it? All the readings they had to do. Go back to that stuff that we had to read about and just say, look, like, it's a team effort. You don't correct yourself, for someone else's mistake. You still keep working as a team and hope that person, you got to trust each other. And I know the backlash would be just that the anger is so far gone that it might not work. They'll just at the end up punching each other on the dock. I don't know, but you have to.
Hopefully not.
I think as a coach, you just have to be the first one to admit, hey, you know what? I wasn't trying to not believe in you by doing all the mixing up, but I didn't. I feel like I must have done it the wrong way, and we are a team, and the team is here. Like, here's the statistics. Now you guys need to build that trust. You have 3 days, 4 days, build it.
Yeah. So not so much being the scapegoat, but more showing that it's okay to say I've messed up, and kind of as a leader, let them all know that they can kind of look to themselves and say, hey, I can do better and we need to do better. And like you said, maybe the risk is that they're too far gone and they're not even going to listen to his apology or anything, and they'll still hate, teammate number 2 for such and such reason.
I just had this thought while she was talking, that really it only takes one little bit of positivity to undo a lot of negativity. When those emails are really focused on how just tearing down each other and building themselves up, if you have just one person sincerely say one good thing about one other person, that spreads pretty easily. And that can make a really big difference for the team.
Okay. So kind of sharing, having the team go around, kind of say, hey, here's something positive. This is what I think you do well, or something. Is that right?
Well, I think it's more within the team than from the coach.
Yeah.
You would really need someone from the team to genuinely say something positive about someone else and find ways to perpetuate it. Make it a norm where they just start doing it on their own. Because if it's forced, they're just going to resent it. No one's really going to want to do it.
Yeah, sounds very good. Being able to enforce positivity by continuously sharing it and breaking that cycle of negativity. So very good. All right. So anything anyone else wanted to share about their thoughts about the case study, about what they would have done differently before we go into what actually ended up happening?
I think we're good.
I think we're good.
All right. Okay, so what ended up happening? It looks like they pulled the varsity team all together again, and the coach had an idea to pair them up in twos. So one-on-one competitions of wrestling without punching. They were supposed to wrestle for, it looks like, 90 seconds. And so they all got together and they teamed up and they wrestled. And the result of the wrestling is that there were no clear winners. And what that started, and they kept doing that. They kept rotating partners, and there was still no clear winners of the wrestling competitions, which kind of told each member, we're all putting our all into this. We're all working hard, and we're all pushing. No one's slacking. No one's being lazy. Like, everyone against everyone, we're basically even. And so as that kind of happened, they got that thought process through. And then also, of course, they blew off some steam because eventually they started picking who they wanted to wrestle. And they would pick, I'm sure, the people that they were mad at. But after that steam blew off, they're like, okay, that's been great. Let's go boating. Let's go rowing now. And they did, and they got back onto track as far as how good they were. So based off of the actual outcome, what do you guys think worked about that, or how do you think that can be applied into other conflicts?
I think it can be applied in any team when it comes down to like thinking you're better than anyone else, but more of just like realizing everyone contributes in their own way, even though it's not the same for every other person.
Mm-hmm.
Because sometimes we think some people have other strengths that are greater than other people's, and that they're not the same value as the other. But we just gotta think that we might not understand what their strength is to a team or something like that.
Like what they bring to the table.
Yeah, for sure.
Anyone else?
It's not
I
necessarily.
know it's kind of funny because I do think it's
ahead.
true. Oh, sorry, Jordan. I think it's true that we're all selfish by just nature. It's just kind of that first thing. It's like we think of our own progress, our own abilities, to improve, and we don't always take the time to look at how others are improving. I kind of go back to that theory, mainly probably because just I'm a mom, I guess, but and I have my kids, age range from 18 to 11, and my daughter, who's 18 all the time, that the 11-year-old's at a different knowledge base than her. Like, she doesn't quite remember her 11 experiences because she went through it, and she doesn't realize that what she thinks I'm being easier on or not so easy on, that it's a different personality, it's a different person, it's a different 11-year-old, not only that, but they have different, just different strengths, like they were saying. So I think it's where those boys are able to get out their frustrations and also realize that everyone had some sort of equality in some way to make it not a clear winner. I think if you do that as a team, might not be wrestling, like you can't go to work and wrestle without your issues, but
right.
You can definitely talk about them and try to remember to find the strength in the other person.
Yep. Yeah. So kind of being in the same mentality and realizing your perspectives might not be the same as someone else's, kind of like your daughters. They have different perspectives. Yeah. Who was it? Jordan, you also had something you wanted to share?
Yeah. I guess the best way to explain it is when we're in a group, we have a certain mode or a certain mentality, and we're willing to try certain things. But when you single into a smaller, like a one-on-one, we're in a complete different mode. We act like not necessarily completely different by any means, but our reaction or our decisions would be influenced in a different manner. I mean, it's when I'm in a large group, I'm a little bit more shy, less to talk about. But when I'm more on one-on-one, I can communicate, the things that I know and what I can do to help that individual, and they're more open to like discussion and to help each other out to succeed, and then we can get our work done. Versus when we're in a group, it's not as open or motivated or willing to help or share. And I
Right.
think that in this case, that was the same example. When everybody was in a group, everybody's influenced differently, possibly more in a negative way. But then once they got on the one-on-one and kind of battle it out, it's, well, I know this individual, I know his strengths and weaknesses, but in another sense, they have a strength in my weakness, and together we can cooperate and help each other out, kind of.
Yeah. So it changed their environment for 90 seconds each. They got a more inclusive, like one-on-one conflict resolution through wrestling in their case, but in any other case, it'd just be something different. But changing that environment and allowing that opportunity that normally couldn't happen in a large group setting.
Absolutely. I mean, that you're more concerned like, well, I got my team, I got my individuals that are willing to back me up. But whereas you're one-on-one, you only have to, depend and rely on you and your own skills. You have, no one else. So you're geared and more motivated in yourself.
Yep. All right. Anyone else? All right. So I think that is it. Let me make sure there's nothing else. Okay, and so
I'm really happy to be your token female on your team. So,
Well, did you guys read the one of the intro things where when you have a team of women, you're better off than a team of men?
yeah, I read that on there.
allow me to present myself to make our team better. Skinny.
Okay. So I guess the very last thing, going down the row, let's start with Brian and work down. What is the number one thing you took away from the case? What is probably the quickest principle you took?
It takes teamwork. I mean, without teamwork, you're not going to succeed.
Very good. All right.
Is that quick enough?
That's it. All right. And Caleb?
I'd say for me, it's you've got to be focused on your teammates. You have to really value them, not just tolerate them.
All right. And Darcy?
I think that for me, it would be the fact that even though, like looking at the JV team, especially, that even though they had individuals in the team, they made sure that they didn't make anything individual. So like when you're working in a group or you're working on a team, I think it's really important to focus on the positives of that team and work as a team.
Okay. And Everett?
I think what I learned a lot is that a label really has a big effect on a team. Like putting some people above another really affects how they work together as a team. That you need to try to take away that mindset to be able to function the best you can with any group of people.
Okay. All right. And then Jordan?
My takeaway was selfishness, how people can't be near as selfish in their own skills and abilities. That when you are in an environment, even if it's one-on-one, you need to be more concerned about the other individual rather than yourself in order to say, hey, what can I do to help them succeed? Because in reality, they're going to be the ones to challenge me and myself. And together we're going to uplift each other, I guess, is kind of the end of my thought.
Mm-hmm. All right. Sounds good. And then I guess sharing my thought process is that the lesson kind of taught that teams are more than just physical strength. They're also a very social and mental game of teamwork. And if you see any of that lacking, the sooner you can catch it, the better. Try different things, whatever it takes. And everyone on the team needs to be patient and also humble and focus on what they can do. I think, it kind of reminds me of when the apostles said, Lord, is it I? Instead of saying, oh, I think it's Judas. So it's just focusing on what you can do to help instead of who failed. So anyways, that is our case study. So I will go ahead and stop unless anyone has anything else they want to say.
I'm good. Thank you.
All right. So after I stop, if you guys want, we can stay on and discuss a little bit of the doohickeys if you guys want. I don't see any email from the professor yet.
Hey, Jordan, is it all right to get your phone number so we can